The Unforgiving Thought. When the pot begins to boil. This is a story about a crab in a boiling pot who becomes certain another crab is against him. As the water grows hotter, he discovers that what traps him most is not the other crab, but the judgment he refuses to question. On the docks of St. Brigid's Bay stood a little seafood stall with a great iron pot. Each morning the fisherman lowered fresh seawater into it and set live crabs inside while the kitchen prepared for the day. Most of the crabs huddled low and still, but one crab named Clasp could not rest. The moment the water began to warm, he felt a nudge from another crab and spun around in outrage. "You shoved me!" "I didn't," said the other crab, a broad-shelled fellow named Moss. The water moved. Clasp snapped his claw. Convenient answer. From that moment on, Clasp watched Moss with suspicion. If Moss shifted, Clasp called it aggression. If Moss lifted a claw, Clasp called it threat. If another crab bumped him from behind, Clasp blamed Moss anyway. Soon the whole pot seemed full of evidence. "See, he's crowding me. See, he wants my place. See, he is trying to force me under." An older crab named Neri watched from the bottom. "You have decided very quickly." "I know what I see," Clasp replied. Neri said nothing. The water grew hotter. Tiny bubbles slid up the iron walls. The crabs began scrambling, climbing over one another, slipping, kicking, and clattering shells. Clasp became frantic. "This is because of him!" he cried, pointing at Moss. "He has turned the whole pot against me." Moss stared in disbelief. "The whole pot?" "Yes, you started this." Clasp lunged. Moss defended himself. Other crabs reacted. Soon everyone was tangled in frightened motion. The more Clasp judged, the more proof he seemed to find. Every splash confirmed his story. Every collision justified his anger. Every movement became part of the accusation. Neri finally called out, "Clasp, what if you are wrong?" Clasp whirled around. "Wrong! Look around! Everything is chaos!" "Yes," said Neri, "but chaos is not proof of your interpretation." Clasp tightened his claws. "I will not be fooled. I know my enemy." Neri rose a little higher in the pot. "No," she said gently. "You know your judgment." Clasp hated those words. They offended him because they opened a crack. If he questioned the judgment, then he would have to question every fierce conclusion built upon it. So he doubled down. He pushed harder. He accused louder. He clamped faster. Around him the pot became war. A young crab cried, "Stop pulling me!" Another shouted, "Someone's on my leg!" Moss tried to speak, but Clasp shouted over him. The water was truly hot now, and fear ran through every shell. Neri moved beside Clasp and said quietly, "Feel below you." "I don't care what's below me. I care what he is doing." "That is the trap," Neri answered. "You are so busy judging what is beside you that you do not notice what is underneath the whole pot." Clasp resisted, but the heat was becoming unbearable. For one instant, exhausted by his own fury, he stopped. Not long, not nobly, just long enough. In that pause he felt it. The rising heat was not coming from Moss. It was coming from below them all. The trembling of the water was not personal. The collisions were not carefully aimed attacks. The panic in the pot had been interpreted through one fixed idea: someone here is doing this to me. Clasp looked at Moss, who was panting with fear. Then at the others, all scrambling in the same confusion. His certainty cracked. "I thought you were the cause." Moss answered, "I thought you hated me." Neri said, "An unforgiving thought never wants to be doubted. It chooses a target, then twists everything to support itself." Clasp lowered his claw. "What happens if I stop defending it?" Neri replied. "Then you may finally see." The water still boiled around them, but something in Clasp became still. Not the pot, not the danger, just the need to keep proving his accusation. He looked without judging. He waited. He did not lunge, did not blame, did not tighten. And in that stillness, reality became simpler. Fear was present, heat was present, movement was present. But the story of enemy, guilt, and attack began to loosen. At that very moment, the fisherman's daughter came running into the stall. "Papa, don't cook those crabs," she pleaded. "Father Thomas needs them for the harbour lesson." The fisherman laughed. "What harbour lesson?" "The one about how creatures fight when frightened." With a shrug, he lifted the pot and carried it down to the sea. One by one, the crabs were tipped back into the water. Clasp sank into the cool depths, stunned by the mercy of it. Beside him, Moss floated in silence. After a while, Clasp said, "I spent all my strength justifying what was never true." Moss answered, "We all get frightened." Neri drifted past them. Fear may begin the frenzy, she said, but judgment keeps it boiling. Clasp never forgot the iron pot. Whenever fear rose in him after that, he watched for the old temptation, to choose a culprit, to fix a meaning, to make a prison out of one unquestioned thought. And when he remembered, he practiced another way. He became still, he looked, he waited, he judged not. For he had learned that forgiveness does not thrash about trying to rearrange reality. It simply welcomes truth as it is, and the boiling starts to lose its power. May we sing, rest, and dance our way home together.